Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to thanking both of you and all of your colleagues, those who are here today and even those who aren't, for making these issues, bringing these issues to the forefront, always, but in particular this year. And I think the important context for this bill, which many people know and many people have seen, splashed in headlines across newspapers all over the country in the last year and a half, is that it's not an overstatement to say that there have been a staggering number of attacks on women's access to basic health care. In particular, in 2011 alone, just last year, states across the country, including New York, introduced over 1,100 bills with the sole aim of restricting or banning access to reproductive health care. And we're talking everything from abortion to contraception to basic cancer screenings. And on top of that, Congress voted 8 times last year on anti-choice measures to again restrict or ban access to reproductive health care. Considering the state of the economy, the state of jobs, and the educational system, it's unconscionable that this is what's happening and this is what's on the forefront of quite a few legislators' minds, both in DC and across the country. We really believe that New York, particularly this year, has a singular opportunity to prioritize women's health, to begin to turn the tide on these attacks and to show the women of this state and frankly this country that this is not what we stand for, that we're going to protect women's basic rights, protect women's access to basic health care, and we're going to do something that should have been done long ago, since this bill, as the senator mentioned, has been around for a couple of years now. New York has a history of leadership on this issue. As Senator Stewart-Cousins referred to, 3 years before Roe v. Wade, New York legalized abortion, and at the time it was a groundbreaking step for women's health. It drastically reduced maternal morbidity and mortality rates, and it meant that women could make their own personal private reproductive health care decisions, get safe medical care once those decisions have been made, and that the decision would sit with themselves, their family, their God, or whoever it is that's important in their life when they make these decisions. We also have a record of legislative intent that these issues are important in New York. New York has taken great steps since that original law was passed to protect and increase access to critical reproductive health care services like contraception and basic GYN care. And the bottom line is that the majority of New Yorkers support this. We've seen in poll after poll, and when you talk to New Yorkers on the ground, 7 out of 10 New Yorkers support the Reproductive Health Act and think it's important that the legislature proactively passes it. So what does this bill do? There's a lot of hoopla about what this is. There's a lot of misinformation from a range of sectors about what this is, what this isn't. What this is at its core is a proactive affirmation of what that 1970 law was intended to do, which is to make sure that every woman in New York can make her own personal private health care decisions. And the critical addition that this bill would make is that the women who are having health issues, particularly later in pregnancy, would also be protected to make those decisions and be able to access health care. The other piece of this is that, again, as the senator mentioned, our abortion law sits in the criminal code. The 1970 law was a very groundbreaking solution done in an inelegant manner in our laws, in the sense that the laws were left in the criminal code. Well, nothing else in healthcare is regulated in the criminal code, and we know that it should be regulated in the health code. And those two key pieces together of what this bill would do, I think, are the most critical. You can only imagine a woman sitting in her doctor's office later in pregnancy with a very wanted pregnancy. They're picking names, they're planning the room, they're planning for a future, and being given devastating news that this pregnancy is not viable and they're not going to make it to term. So this woman is sitting there being given life-shattering news, and then the next breath is being told by her doctor that to get the abortion care she needs, she has to leave New York State. The problem with our law is this: we have a troubling gap. We have no allowance and no protections for those women who receive that devastating news later in pregnancy, and it's compounded by the fact that our law sits in the criminal code. So that doctor sitting across from her is also thinking in the back of their minds, I could be criminally prosecuted for even considering providing her that care here in New York. For very understandable reasons, those doctors are not providing that care. So this is a problem that we can fix. We can fix it easily. We can pass this common sense law. We know the vast majority of New Yorkers support it. We know that most people in this country believe that a woman should be able to make her own personal private health care decisions with her doctor, with her family, and the Reproductive Health Act will make sure that women in New York can do that. We're just on, with 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade on the horizon, we know that New York's law is what the women of this state rely on, as we've seen what Congress and other states have done to target the protections of Roe over the last 40 years. So we look forward to continuing to work with our colleagues in Albany to make sure that this bill is passed and that it's passed soon, because those women who are sitting in their doctor's offices today, tomorrow, next week, receiving devastating news, should not be told that their only option, if they even have the option financially, is to leave the state. So thank you very much, and I will pass it over to my colleague.